This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
And welcome to Q&A number 32, Michelle's birthday Q&A.
Yes, I am 32 years old.
It's funny, Michelle, you mentioned at the last one that, we're binge recording, which is true. So on that line, unsurprisingly, I still have a bad headache. Since we're just doing them back to back, it would be something of a miracle if the fucking thing just disappeared while I was doing this. Mm-hmm. Seems unlikely. Hope. Well, I can always hope. But, hope is nice. Mm-hmm. And also but the other thing I realized was, I don't know how often, are we just releasing these once a week? So this would be funny. If 3 weeks in a row someone listening is like, oh, there's Kate's headache again.
Yeah, I was actually mapping it out this morning. Of when to release them over the next coming months. About bi-weekly.
Okay.
Every other week or so, you guys will be getting a Q&A.
Oh, man, that'll be even more funny then. It'll be like a month and a half of Kate having headaches. Anyway, that was just something it was occurring to me. It was like, well, I know that we're recording these back to back, and they're never released literally back to back. I knew there was space, but I was like, I don't know how much space.
Yeah, a couple weeks in between each one.
So that's funny. Anyway, so welcome. Happy Michelle's birthday to the Q&As. And you start us off today.
Yeah, and I'll just acknowledge this first one and the second one are both about therapist issues. So kind of
it's true.
Funny that those occurred back to back in the order we're doing these in. So this one says, I was focusing on practicing the turning your mind / acceptance skill this week. I was trying to hold the fact that I'm frustrated with the amount of work I have and also accept that it will be my reality for a few months. I presented this in my share in my DBT group last week, and my group leader proceeded to completely invalidate my feelings by trying to solve my quote-unquote problem. It did not help me with acceptance, and all I ended up doing was defending myself and feeling hurt. I told her this, and we were going to make time to talk about it. But our schedules don't match up, so I wrote her an email instead. Now I'm anxiously awaiting her response by Monday because she's out of town. I didn't learn any turning my mind, and this whole experience just hurt my trust in her, and I don't feel safe sharing in front of her anymore right now. How do you begin the path of acceptance of a frustrating situation?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to start with saying bravo on speaking up. Much though I try to encourage in all of my clients, and it's a really healthy and wonderful thing, a lot of people don't step up and tell a therapist when they've done something that, hurt them or did something that hurt their trust in that therapist, or, right, like a lot of people stay quiet because of the perceived power dynamic or other reasons. So I just want to start off by saying, congrats on that. Good job. Give yourself a pat on the back. Then I think the other stuff that I'm going to say probably applies no matter which way you interpret this, but as sometimes happens, listening to you read it, Michelle, I was realizing they're like, all right, how do you begin the path of acceptance of a frustrating situation? And I thought this was referring back to the work situation that they were saying they were trying to figure out how to.
In the
group.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And now I'm like, oh, but that could also mean the frustrating situation of not feeling very safe in front of the therapist
Mhm.
or not being, anyway. So I will simply say that that there are sirens going by. Don't know if you guys can hear that, but there they go.
I can hear it.
Can you hear it? All right. Go away. Anyway, so I just want to own that is what I was thinking of when I wrote the next few bits. I think it's, to an extent, applicable either way, but it definitely leans towards the work one. So with that in mind, what I was going to say is it sounds like you are already on the path. You don't need to begin the path. You have begun the path. Right? You may just not be as far along as you'd like to be already. And that's okay, right? That it takes time, especially if you're still sort of learning these skills of the turning your mind or acceptance, right? But you've already sort of, I don't know, highlighted the dialectic where you're working on sitting, right? Of like, yep, I am frustrated. And also, this is how this is going to be. Right? My frustration doesn't actually change that at all. That's a huge step to just be able to recognize both of those things and both of them as true, that they don't have to cancel each other out, I don't know why being frustrated and it being the reality would cancel each other out. That might be a weird way of phrasing it, but right, like you can hold both parts of this, right? You don't have to invalidate your frustration to accept. And accepting, doesn't mean you're not frustrated. Mm-hmm. So I think you're definitely already on the path. What I would suggest maybe to help nudge yourself further along the path might be something like trying to find a mantra or something to repeat, right? I know we've talked about it other times in the podcast, but right, the neurons that fire together wire together. So if you can find just a short little thing to say kind of over and over again to yourself, which this, I guess, probably most closely matches up with effective rethinking and paired relaxation. So you could use that in this case, but right, just repeating an intentional thought about the situation can do a lot to help you move to where you're trying to get to with it. That could also apply, I think, to the situation with the DBT group leader of like, I'm frustrated and hurt right now. And I also think that I can get to a better place in the end, right? Or I don't have to run away just because of that or whatever, right? Something that feels like it's validating and serving the purpose of getting you towards where you want to get to. And last but certainly not least, you might also try some meditation on the subject, right? This can help you be a little bit, not detached, that's the wrong word, but have a slightly more observational standpoint of what you're going through, which can often help reduce the intensity of any emotions that are wrapped up in it. Meditation also can lead you into being in kind of a wise mind space, which can help you in any decision making you might need to be in. But yeah, I think you're already doing well, and I think you're already doing well no matter which situation you were talking about, because the fact that you spoke up to the therapist and wrote the letter, the email, those are already both two great steps along the path, whichever path that you're talking about. Yeah. So those are my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, I think all that's great. To follow up on this, because this was posted a while ago in the Facebook group, but luckily it sounds like this listener did end up working things out with their group leader.
Oh, good.
So yeah, so it has a happy ending, we could say, but I don't know. I feel like it's hard when it comes to situations whenever people are writing into us saying this interaction happened with another person and it didn't feel good to me.
Yeah.
Whether that's an interaction with a coworker, whether that's an interaction with a partner, whether that's an interaction with a therapist. Sometimes, even though Kate and I don't know the listener who's writing in or the person they're talking about, we can get a pretty clear sense of like, whoa, that's not okay. Like we do with the next one that Kate will be reading. But other times,
sneak peek.
Yeah, sneak peek, right? Other times though, like there's a lot of gray area. So I want to balance like empathizing with this listener while also recognizing that, we don't know what was necessarily going on with this therapist, or like what kind of misunderstanding took place. I tend to like to give people the benefit of the doubt most of the time, which is that misunderstandings happen. They happen every single day. For those of you who live with anybody, roommates, partners, parents, other family members, or friends, misunderstandings happen every single day. Pretty much. I mean, it just does. It's kind of inevitable when you're in a relationship with someone long enough. And when I first read this, that was my initial response, was like, ooh, there was a misunderstanding here. Like, could the therapist have handled it better? Yeah, right? Probably. It's not good if the listener's feeling completely invalidated. Ooh, that's not good. So the therapist probably could have done a better job. And also, this seemed to just be an example of a misunderstanding, where maybe the therapist really thought that this listener was looking for a solution here and thought they were being helpful by saying, oh, well, why don't you do this or that? Or like, ooh, I don't know. Maybe saying something like, oh, I don't know if that anger is really serving you, or, you know, trying to come from this helpful place. And it was just not what this listener needed. And so it did not land well, wasn't the best response at the time, but was the therapist maybe trying? I'd like to think so. So it gets difficult, right? Because I think a lot of times when people write into us with certain situations, they're just straight up misunderstandings where neither person has ill intent. Neither person is necessarily doing something like wrong or bad. It's just a mismatch. It just does not line up. It wasn't what was needed at the time. And that seems to be what happened here. And so I say all that because I think that can be a helpful thing to keep in mind in general when we're interacting with people in our lives. It can be, I'm not saying this listener is doing this at all, actually. I love that this listener followed up and wanted to address what happened. Again, Kate praised the hell out of this listener for that. I also want to praise the hell out of this listener for that. But just as a general rule of thumb for everybody, when we're moving through life and when we have an interaction with someone like this listener did with their DBT group leader, and it just didn't feel good. It felt yucky. Like, it did not feel helpful. It was invalidating. It was all these things. Is to really try to take that stance of like, is this just a misunderstanding? And how can I not paint either of us necessarily out to be the bad guy? Again, there will certainly be situations in life, if abuse is present or other things where, ooh, someone was clearly in the wrong here. But for most of our interactions, it's not the case. It's two imperfect people trying their best, and it doesn't always go so well. That's a lot of what it is. And when we can have that kindness and compassion for ourselves and the other people that we're interacting with, it makes it a lot easier for us to resolve issues than when we assume that the other person is trying to hurt us. Because chances are they're not. And luckily in this case, you know, this listener was able to work it out with the group leader and clarify some things. So, you know, worked out well. So I don't view the group leader as the bad guy here in any way. I just think it was a misunderstanding, and I'm glad that they were able to resolve it.
Yep. And they're probably most able to resolve it because, as you said, we're praising the hell out of it. The person actually reached out.
Yes. They said, hey, this didn't feel good to me. Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, I imagine that was kind of at the heart of what they said. And a lot of times when you do that, again, not always, right? And it's a red flag if someone's like, no, we cannot talk about it. But most of the time, if you take that stance of just like, hey, could we kind of go back to this and maybe try to see how we can redo it or talk through what actually occurred? How did you feel? This is how I felt. Most people will do that work with you. I hope.
All right, for a much differently flavored one.
Here we go.
Despite being on the same subject. This one says, well, it happened. My therapist gave up on me. during a time when I was starting to feel more connected and more vulnerable. We had a rupture, and I guess I acted like it was more of a big deal than it was. In brackets, it says, I feared her getting too close, so I was trying to push her away. End brackets goes, and so she ended it. This was 2 sessions after she told me I hadn't ruined anything and she wasn't leaving. To say I'm shattered is an understatement. How do you cope? I can't function, and I'm not sure how to stop crying. Are there any DBT skills that will make me not feel so awful about myself and hate myself more?
Yeah. Excuse me. So Kate says this in her notes. So I'm not going to touch on this too much, even though I'm the one starting off here. Kate wrote down, therapist acted unprofessionally. So Kate will probably dive into kind of some of the ethical concerns here. Because there's some pretty glaring concerns. But I want to focus in on the listener's experience rather than what the therapist did wrong.
Yeah.
The therapist.
And you can certainly chime in about how wrong the therapist was if I miss anything.
Kate will talk about how wrong the therapist was. But boy, is there going to be a lot of grief here. A lot.
Yes.
Because this was a very sudden loss. And, you know, we've probably said this at other times on the podcast or during Q&As because we do get people writing into us fairly regularly about therapist issues. And, you know, the therapeutic relationship is sacred and it's unique. You only have one therapist, you know, at a time. You might have multiple therapists throughout your life, but you might have like 5 friends, right? You have like 4 uncles or that kind of a thing. You get one therapist. And so when you lose that person, you also lose that relationship. And that can intensify grief quite a lot. So I completely understand this listener just feeling now emotionally unsafe and really shaken up.
Yes.
Because above all, as therapists, you know, like I was just acknowledging in the last one, do miscommunications happen? Are we imperfect people? 100% we are. And also, our hopefully number one goal is to have our clients feel emotionally safe. Even if sometimes we say the wrong thing, you know? That kind of an idea. This person doesn't feel emotionally safe anymore. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
The thing also that I really want to address is the part at the end where it says, like, what will make me not feel so awful about myself and hate myself more? So the skill that I thought of here was check the facts. And the reason why is because, listener, I want you to take some of this responsibility off of your shoulders for what your therapist did. And if we really look at the facts of the situation, there's probably a lot that you don't know. I think that's part of the problem, is that the therapist did not really, it sounds like, clearly communicate to you why they made the decision to end the relationship. So there's a lot that you don't know, and there's a lot of this that I don't think is yours to take on.
No.
You know, I hear you when you're like, we had a rupture. We don't know what that means. Kate and I, we don't know. We weren't flies on the wall for that therapy session. We don't know what the rupture was or what happened. Like ruptures in all different kinds of relationships, you know, one could make the argument it takes 2 to tango. Could there have been something you might have done differently or better? Perhaps. But I really think that if you check the facts here, what it's going to show is that you are not responsible for the ultimate decision to end this relationship. Your therapist ended it, not you. And that hating yourself isn't going to make this any better. And I don't want you to feel so awful about what happened. I want you to be able to really give responsibility to your therapist for the things that she did that were not right, and to take some blame off of yourself. Check the facts might help you do that. The other thing is that if you are going to seek out another therapist, take as much time as you need to do that, and make sure to tell your new therapist about what happened here with this one. I tell clients a lot, if they've had past negative experiences in therapy, to well, I say clients, I'm thinking actually just like people that I know. Like, I have a friend who wanted to go back to therapy recently, and she called me before her session with her new therapist, who was a person I referred her to. Like, she asked me, she's like, can you give me names of therapists? So I did. And she called me like freaking out like 30 minutes before her session. She's like, I'm feeling so nervous. And I'm like, tell your therapist that. Like, not in a way of like, don't tell me. Like, by all means, I'll be here for you. I'll be a supportive friend for you. And also, tell your therapist that. Like, it really helps me to know when people have unfortunately had traumatic experiences with past therapists, so I can be extra sensitive to that history.
Not to duplicate it.
Yep, to not duplicate it. If you had a therapist who, let's say, always ran like late for sessions, and that was really hard for you, guess what? I'm going to try extra hard to be on time because that's an attachment wound for you, is how I view it. So communicate this to a new therapist whenever you do find someone new, if that is something you decide to pursue. The very last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Kate. You know, the other DBT skill that could be helpful here that I thought of is using FAST. And I could imagine FAST looking a few different ways. FAST could look like sending an email to this therapist. It could. Saying, hey, I'm pretty devastated after this, kind of a thing. FAST could look, if you wanted to, like filing a formal complaint with the licensure board in your state, assuming you're here in the United States. FAST could look like a number of different things to really try to use your voice to explain how hard this is for you. The only disclaimer I will give is to make sure that it's not being done from a place of anger.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's not gonna probably serve you. Because people will sometimes do this, right? We get hurt by someone and then we want to go on a crusade. We're like, then we wind up sending angry emails in all caps, and we wind up like calling all these people trying to, file complaints, and it just doesn't serve us. But if you're feeling in a centered place, and if you're like, you know what, I really do want to take some further action here. I really do have some more things that I need to say about what happened and how this is impacting me. You can go ahead and do that. I don't want you to feel completely powerless in this situation, and it makes sense why you might feel pretty powerless, because once a therapist says, I'm not going to work with you any longer, your options are pretty limited of what you can do from there.
Yeah.
Like, if they make that call, you're not going to be working with them any longer. But if that would feel helpful for you, you can consider using FAST as a skill here as well to communicate why this was so difficult. So, some options there.
I like it. And now I swear you're going to end up chiming in for me, because I don't have too many different, like, exact ways of putting it. I just want to start off by saying that I don't know, my jaw fell open reading about how this therapist behaved. It was so remarkably unprofessional. The thing that stood out to me the most about it was this was 2 sessions after she told me she wasn't leaving. Like, what?
That's what
in
got
the name of fuck? Like, there's plenty of reasons that someone might choose to stop working with someone else, and it's not inherently unprofessional. I mean, it better not be inherently unprofessional for any given therapist to decide to stop working with any given client. I mean, there are certain things to consider, like, is that client currently in a state of crisis? Like, are you able to give them referrals to someone else so you can do some sort of handoff and they don't have to have a lapse in services if that would be bad for them? Like, there's stuff to attend to make sure that you're ending things well. And I don't know, you at least don't mention the therapist doing those things.
Yeah.
So it sounds like she was missing that as well. But, right, we're allowed to end relationships with clients, but the how and the when matter a lot. And if this, yeah, you know me, Michelle, I do, much like you, I try and see people in the best light. I try and make things make sense. And I'm just be like, what on earth motivated this human being to say, I'm not leaving? And then 2 days later, take that back.
Yeah, that was
that
the
is
exact same thing for me. It was that sentence in this post of like, this was 2 sessions after she told me I hadn't ruined anything and she wasn't leaving. I don't know what justifies that.
Like, if you're going to be leaving because of a thing, you need to be transparent about it. Like, you know, actually, that whatever the rupture was, so I assume she would have talked about it explicitly, right? But, you know, this thing happened. It's really impacted our working relationship from my side, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. That's okay. You can say you don't know. Not knowing is a fine place to be.
But don't say you're not going to leave and then...
No, and then leave. Yeah. No, so wrong. So deeply wrong. So, yeah, I just want to say, therapist was incredibly unprofessional. And that's not your fault, listener. Like, that's on them. That's their responsibility for how they behave. That's their ethical code of conduct. Right? And that is not your fault. I mean, as a therapist who has on occasion been like real actively mistreated by people, I can appreciate, you know, not wanting a relationship in which that happened, but I don't have any particular reason to believe you did that just from the way that it was phrased, but I honestly don't really care how you behaved. She still had her ethical obligations for how to terminate the working relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't care how loud, rude, angry, upsetting, like, whatever you were during that rupture, you still deserved better, and she still needed to behave differently. So I just really wanted to beat that dead horse into the ground. Both just the fact of how unprofessional, and I would say unethical, her behavior was, and also that that's not your fault, right? I think, Michelle, you mentioned it standing out to you, but obviously, you know, not obviously, I guess, but it definitely stood out to me as well. The, like, how do I make myself not feel so awful about myself and hate myself anymore? And that's why I want to drill into this person's head as much as possible, that it's not your fault that she reacted inappropriately.
Yep.
Right? So try real hard, and I know it's going to be real hard, but try real hard to remind yourself of the fact that you're not responsible for her choices or her behavior. Because you're not. And she fucked up in a big way. And you're not responsible for that. So that's what I want to start with. Michelle, I think you covered a lot about like how, like, why it's so emotionally upsetting. So I don't think I need to go into that really at all. So the last thing I will say is some skills, I guess, that I do think might be helpful. I'm just like, I don't even want to mention the first one I wrote down first because I feel so cliche saying it all the time. God damn it! But
Q&A doesn't go by without Kate mentioning self-soothe.
It doesn't. It's true. But really,
yeah,
self-soothe is a big one, right? Anytime I hear about people suffering with grief, right, with real profound sadness, I think about doing self-soothe. So that's the first thing. Try and exercise kindness to yourself, and not just in like self-talk, but in action, right? And taking care of yourself in those sorts of ways. So next would be accepts, right? The distress tolerance skill. It's wonderful for when, you know, shit has really hit the fan and we're having a hard time moving past a thing. We're having a hard time not having our thoughts be consumed with a thing. Accepts can be a really wonderful place from which to, you know, tackle that. And then last but not least, please. The, just for helping to reduce your emotional, vulnerability You know, a lot of times when we're in that hard of a place, we stop taking care of ourselves and our basic needs. So you don't mention that, but I'm just guessing if you're feeling shattered and saying you can't function, that maybe your please skills have gone in the toilet. So I would think about focusing in on those again as well, just as a way to help give yourself resources with which to cope with all of this. So, yep, self-soothe, accept, and please would be the skills I would lean towards.
Okay, on to the next one.
Sounds good.
All right. So this one says, my twin sister blames me for my behaviors without taking into account that I have severe mental disorders. And then in parentheses, they say BPD and bipolar 1. Starting when I was 14, when I had episodes, some of my behaviors were bizarre. I also know that BPD has caused me to be very hurtful when I have splitting. I am being accountable and working on myself. My sister goes through periods of times with not talking to me. Normally for her, I'm very marginalized within the family. I am gay. My partner of 17 years died from cancer. I live alone. She has family, and I'm not included in most of her family events. If she were alone and I had family, I know I would be sure to include her. My question, even with all the DBT skills, it does not make me radically accept how she treats me. I feel that totally ending my contact with her permanently might be best. It hurts so much to be marginalized. Do you have any relationships that you have permanently ended? Is it wise for me to never see my sister again? Mental disorders are hereditary in my family and skipped only one generation, to the best of my knowledge. My father's mother's aunt lived her life in a mental asylum in Maryland. She died there in 1964. And my younger brother is diagnosed with BPD and bipolar 1. Both of us have psychosis when not medicated. And that's how they ended the post. So you get to start.
That's hard.
Uh-huh.
Not the responding. That sounds weird. Just the situation.
The situation, yeah, exactly.
That the person is in. So, one of the questions they asked is oh goddess, talking is hard. Is if there was anybody we had relationships with that we've like permanently ended. Which, I mean, I assume we don't mean things like broken up with a boyfriend. So the closest thing I have, and I think I've talked about it on here before, is I did cut off contact with my mother for a year. It wasn't permanent, so I know that's not quite matching what this person is asking about. But that's, I don't know, the closest I had, and I did want to say that it was very beneficial for me. It was very healthy for me to do that. But the other thing I wanted to say was that, you know, you're not committed to forever, right? You're not committed to whatever choice you make. It's not like if you decide now that you're cut off from her permanently, you're never allowed to change your mind for any reason moving forward ever again. Amen. Right? You're making this choice for you based on what's right for you right now, if that's what you do. And maybe that remains the choice forever. And that's fine if it does. And maybe for whatever reasons or circumstances that come up, you decide to change your mind later. You're allowed to do that. So the thing I just wanted to get across there, not skill-wise or anything else, is just whatever you decide to do, whether it be stay in contact or not, just know you're always allowed to change your mind and go the other direction again. Right? You're not, I don't know. Yeah, committed. Trying to think of a better word, but that's what I have. I was wondering, like, what kind of communications this listener had tried with their sister. Not trying to say they haven't already tried everything. They just literally don't mention one way or the other what they have or haven't tried. So if they are trying to stay in their sister's life, there you go. I do just kind of wonder, yeah, what they've tried. If they've already been really explicit about what they're wanting, missing, needing. Or if they're, maybe like, well, of course she would know that it hurts that she doesn't invite me, to family things. We like to think that people would understand us, especially people who are our Swiss sisters or, parents or whatever, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they misread or misunderstand. So if you haven't tried direct communication, I would urge that. And then, I don't know, I wanted to really validate that it's hard to radically accept ongoing situations. It's not impossible, but it's hard enough to radically accept a sort of one and done, that's what reality is. It adds a whole nother layer of difficulty to be radically accepting an ongoing thing. Like, oh, still sucks, still sucks, still sucks, still sucks, still sucking, right? Like, it's almost like you have to radically accept anew every day as opposed to just reapproaching the same problem. So just a lot of validation, I don't think you have to be doing anything wrong or be failing at it for it to be hard and not there yet, right? And then last but not least, and I realized, I don't know, Michelle, I don't know if you have any. Oh yeah, you have a actual skill listed because I didn't write it.
I did put in a skill, and I also realized I must have only barely skimmed the notes that you had already put in because we're going to be saying much the same things, I realized.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, well, it happens.
But yes,
sometimes.
I do have a DBT skill for this.
But yeah, anyway, so the last thing I thought about is just wondering if this person has, we use the phrase a trusted other of some sort that they can talk to about it, talk it through with, because again, I don't know, I feel like we've said this more often today than usual in Q&As. We only have such a small window into the situation in this, one communication. So if you have a friend or another family member, maybe that younger brother you're talking about, or a therapist, which I see Michelle's going to talk about. Oh, you even used the word trusted other.
Yeah, I did. That's what was cracking me up. I was like, wait, Kate made a note about talking to a trusted other too?
I did.
We really recommend talking this through with a trusted other.
Hey, consensus, right? We agree. Because, that's someone who can both support you through whatever decision you make and maybe help you figure out if that's the wise decision or not better than we possibly could. So I won't go into that too much more, and maybe you have more to say about it, Michelle.
Yeah. I mean, to start, I'm going to probably repeat a lot of what you said just in different wording. Yeah. Which is, I really agree with that piece you were talking about. In terms of like, you don't have to make a final decision right now about this relationship forever and ever. Like exactly how you put it, really. Because when I'm working with clients who are facing this in their lives for whatever reason, there's somebody in their life that has really hurt them or the relationship has been conflictual for a long time. And they're kind of in this headspace of trying to sort out what kinds of boundaries do I put in place with this person? And do I stop having contact with them? People face this dilemma a lot when it comes to family members or close friends, or when you realize the relationship isn't healthy, it's like, well, then what do I do with it? How do I end it? Yeah. And what I tell my clients a lot is that it's about making a decision that feels good for you right now. That's what it's about. So if it would feel good for you right now to decrease or completely cut off contact with your sister, you can do that. But exactly as Kate was saying, I do tell my clients that it can be helpful to not necessarily put a timeline on this or a deadline on this. To not say, I'm never talking to them ever again. Maybe that's what winds up happening. Maybe you decide that this is what feels good to you right now is to cease contact. And hey, fast forward 5 years, that still feels good to you to not have contact with them. And maybe it does just kind of continue that way until, well, I guess if we're being honest, one or both of you die. Like until it can't continue any longer, it may be that you never have contact with that person ever again. But I also tell people, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what life holds. We don't know what could change. And the decision that we make today may not be applicable 20 years from now. Because we don't know what 20 years from now looks like. So time may pass and you may realize over time that what you needed now in this current moment, fast forward, now you need something different. So you can change your mind at any point in time and you don't have to make a permanent decision right now. I think whenever we're trying to make like really permanent decisions when it comes to, with the exception of ending romantic relationships, right? that tends to be pretty permanent. But when it comes to family members, yeah, we want to exercise caution with saying, I'm never going to talk to this person ever again. Because a lot of times we just don't know. So make a decision that feels good to you for now. And we'll just see how long that feels good for you. The DBT skill that Kate was referencing that I put in my notes is that to help you come to this decision, I would use pros and cons. So if we remember pros and cons DBT style, pros and cons is typically meant to be used for problem behavior. So I'm kind of taking it and applying it to something that DBT probably wouldn't. But what are the pros of ending communication with her? What are the cons of ending communication with her? What are the pros of continuing to have communication with her? And what are the cons of continuing to have communication with her? That's how it would wind up being in the 2x2 grid, I think. Really think through all of that and give yourself time, because this is not a decision to take lightly. Even if, let's say, you make the decision to cease contact with her and then a week from now you're like, never mind, I've changed my mind. I mean, it's still a big decision to be facing no matter how long it lasts for. So I would recommend doing pros and cons. And as Kate was already saying, talk through it with a trusted other. I honestly probably would refrain from talking through this decision with any other family members.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
I would pick a friend. Maybe someone who knows your sister, but not someone in the family. Because they're going to have a stake in that or their own opinions about that. And they have their own personal relationship with her that may be good or not so good. So I would pick someone who, again, is aware of your family dynamics, but not in your family as a trusted other.
That's a fair point, as opposed to the brother, like I said. That's a good point, Michelle.
Yeah. Or a therapist, right? Therapists are great trusted others. We hope so.
Ideally.
Yeah. And though to what you were saying, Kate, I think even if I recommend not using the brother as someone to bounce this off of, what do you think I should do? Regardless of I think anyways, if you do make the decision to cut off contact with her, that's still a decision to then share with other people in the family if you feel comfortable doing so, letting them know what boundaries you're setting up, kind of walking them through your decision making. You can definitely, I think, communicate about this with people in the family. You may need to, honestly, if they're inviting you for Christmas and you're like, hey, not gonna go because sister's gonna be there, sort of a thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a big decision to make. It's just a big decision, no matter how you look at it. So, But yeah, that's what I think about it.
All right, the next one and last one says, I'm at a complete loss of what to do right now. I work full-time with my husband doing wedding photography and videography, and I have been extremely burnt out for the past year and a half. Last summer really put me through the ringer. I was diagnosed with BPD early last year, right before COVID hit, and because everything closed down, I wasn't able to get any help. I went through a faith crisis and left the religion I was raised in, and work was the busiest it had ever been for us. I was drowning in editing and life, feeling the most alone, depressed, and suicidal I've ever been. Things have gotten better since then. I've gotten help in therapy, but I'm still struggling with work the most. There are things I love about the job, but honestly, I hate it 95% of the time. I don't feel confident in my work. I don't feel comfortable talking to my clients for fear I'm saying the wrong things. I'm so miserable and honestly would rather be dead than have to deal with any of it anymore. But I've made commitments and I feel like I need to keep them. I've expressed multiple times to my husband that I want a break, but with our schedule, it's hard to take one without having to find replacements and such, and it seems like it's more stress than it's worth. I'm super indecisive and have been back and forth, not making a final decision on what I want to do, but also kind of expecting him to make the decision for me, because I don't want to leave my husband with all of my workload. I don't have a backup plan or any idea of what to do for work if I quit. I'm afraid I'll feel even more less than compared to my husband because I won't be bringing in any income. It's causing so much stress between us as a couple. I honestly just want to run away from everything and completely start from scratch. I don't want to hate my life anymore.
Yeah. I remember reading this post, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are lots of posts or emails that we read where I'm like, whoa, that's heavy. I had a strong reaction to this post because I was just like, where to start? Like, I really felt like I don't know, this listener's dilemma is so big, and there
Mm-hmm.
isn't an easy solution. Like, I think I just want to start off by saying that there is no easy solution here. There's nothing that's going to feel good. Like, it's not going to feel good to continue pushing forward with work. It's not going to feel good to take a step back. Nothing's going to feel good. The very first thought that I had, and I typed it in my notes, and then I paused because I was like, what else do I say besides this? This was the very present in my mind, was, have you told your husband that you are feeling suicidal? Have you used that word? And it's a scary word to use. It's scary to tell the people in your life that you love and who love you, I've thought about killing myself. That's not easy. And at the same time, if you have just been maybe dancing around that and saying things like, I'm burnt out, I'm really tired, I feel overwhelmed, this is a lot, they might not understand the gravity of how this is actually impacting you. And sometimes when people hear the word suicide, it is a wake-up call for them that things really need to change. So if you have not said that word to him, I would say that word to him, because I think that's really the only way for him to truly comprehend how big this is for you. Then the other things that started to come up for me, I think about a common part of many vows, which is in sickness and in health. And listener, you are in sickness right now. Yes, this sickness does not look like a physical sickness, but mental health wise, your mental health is really struggling. And when we say in sickness and in health, what that means is that the other person is agreeing to pick up the slack when one person is sick. They're agreeing and they are promising to carry the workload when the other person can't. Don't know your husband. Don't know how healthy or unhealthy the relationship is between the two of you. But hey, if the two of you manage to run a business together, that says something. A lot of couples can't do that without wanting to like rip each other apart. So I'm hopeful that there are some positive redeeming qualities in your marriage, and that your husband would be willing to take on more to give you the break that you need, whether that break is temporary or permanent. I'm hopeful that he would be open to doing that. Because I mean, overall, like, if you were to really ask me what I think in terms of like, well, what do I do here? Do I keep moving forward or do I take a step back? Again, I don't know logistically what it would look like to take a step back. I already acknowledged that that's not going to feel good. Honestly, I think you need to take a step back. And that step back might be for a week, just to kind of, I don't know, it's like a little vacation. Either you can actually go somewhere or you can just be at home on the couch. Whether that's a week or whether that's a month or whether that is permanently, I do really sense that you need a break. I kind of feel like the worst thing that you could do, here right now, is to keep continuing forward. You've got to take a break. You've got to take a step back for a little bit. And I think taking that break will tell you a lot, because that will either give you a chance to kind of recharge your batteries. Am I getting into what you're saying, Kate?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. She pointed at me. Okay. Well, I'll finish my thought and then hopefully you'll have more to add. It'll either give you a chance to recharge your batteries, or it will point you in the direction that this really is not the career for you any longer. Because that tells us something. When we try taking breaks and then we come back, and every time we come back, it still feels just as shitty. well, no, this isn't working for you anymore. And then it might be trying to get curious about applying for other jobs, whatever those may be. But no matter what, I do think you need to take a break. And I think you need to be really honest with your husband, if you haven't been honest with him already, about how much your mental health is struggling. Okay. I hope I didn't take too much from you.
You just mostly took my entire last point. That's okay.
Okay.
Just less for me to say. No, so I don't know. Michelle already said it, but I will just echo that, yeah, reading this, yeah, this person's situation is obviously really heavy. And so I just wanted to start with a lot of empathy. You know, I've not for those reasons, but I've certainly been been suicidal and been in kind of these incredibly dark spaces. And it's more than rough. There aren't even really good words for it. So to start with, just a giant pile of empathy. I did wonder, you talk about having your own therapist, listener, but I wondered if you and your husband might be open to the idea of couples counseling for support through this. You know, you talk about it having, a huge impact on your relationship, which makes sense, considering one person having a mental health crisis often has an impact on a relationship, even when they don't run a business together. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I wondered if couples counseling coming into the picture might be a good idea. Nothing wrong with it. Plenty of people do couples counseling with their partner and have their own individual therapist. In fact, it can be a nice combination because you do different things and they can, support each other in that way. It also might help your husband better understand what you're going through, right? I don't know his mental health situation or anything else, but if he's someone who hasn't ever struggled with that, he might be having a hard time really understanding. So I echo what Michelle said about, communicating really honestly and openly with him, which might feel easier in the presence of a therapist. But also the therapist might be able to help your husband better understand, like the gravity of what's going on and really what's needed. So that was one suggestion I was thinking of. The next one is, I don't know. It sounds more callous than I meant it to when I read how I wrote it, but I'm also not entirely sure how to better phrase it, which is just meant to be, I guess, a reminder that death isn't better than burdening your husband. And super practically, you're burdening him as much or more, right? If you kill yourself, because then he's out a business partner and he's having to deal with the death of a partner, right? Mm-hmm. So I get it, right? Again, I've been suicidal, and this idea of, I don't know, death can seem so relieving, right? Like, I just need to put this burden down entirely, and sometimes that's the only way we can think of to do it. We think that way because our brains aren't working right in the moment. So just that gentle reminder of that. And I guess that's how I'll take the last point that I was saying and make it a little bit different than how you were phrasing it, Michelle, is just, there's a lot of different ways in which taking a break, or just stopping entirely doing the things that you're miserable about. There's a lot of different ways that can be impactful, but one of them is that maybe it will work and you will become non-suicidal. You'll become significantly less depressed, and that will be awesome because no one thinks clearly when they're that distressed. You can't. It's not possible. The human brain's first imperative is to keep living, and once it's flipped the switch on that, you gotta know that shit ain't working right. So, on the more, I don't even know how to put it, like yours seems sort of practical in the, like, see how you feel about it side of things, Michelle. And I think mine is just, you actually can't know how you think or feel about it right now, because human brains aren't meant to function the way yours is right now, and they don't real well, right? So, I stand with Michelle about the idea that moving forward is the worst option. Well, that's the phrase you were using. Moving forward, doing the same things. Please move forward. I hope you move forward.
Yeah. Something's got to change, is I
but
think
something's
what we
got to
agree
give.
on.
Yeah, piles and piles of empathy. A gentle reminder that death isn't actually better or a lesser burden for your husband. And also a gentle reminder that human brains don't always work at their best capacity, and they can't when they're that distressed. So walking away from things as they are right now gives you a much better chance to think about it clearly. I guess also, I don't know, you didn't mention this. I'm pulling this now. I'm projecting, so pardon me. I'll just own that. The cool thing is also about doing these things is actually will help you be a better partner and more supportive person.
Yeah.
You think that you're sort of staying in it because you don't want to burden him, but if you can get to a place of mental health, you'll be able to approach the relationship, whatever work you decide to do, like just the whole thing from such a more resourced place that, yeah, it will actually help you improve those things that you're worried about. So that too.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's all I have.
That's a good note to end on. Yeah. So we're done with Q&A 32 now.
In the bag, in the bucket,
Yep.
in the books, in the
it's somewhere.
So
send us emails, dbtmepodcast@gmail.com, or make posts in the Facebook group if you're needing help or support, and we'll be here for you.
All right.
Okay. Thanks,
Very
everybody.
headachy Kate says, thanks for putting up with me, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT